consciousness may be journeying today. I'm Marcus Quillam.
And I'm Jane Beaumont. Welcome to Unseen Journeys, where we explore the mysteries that lie beyond our everyday awareness.
Today we're venturing into a fascinating realm that has captivated human imagination for millennia. Astral travel, or as some call it, the projection of consciousness beyond the physical body.
I've been looking forward to this episode for weeks, Marcus. As many of our regular listeners know, I've had experiences with astral projection since I was a teenager. My first conscious projection happened when I was 16. I remember floating above my bed, looking down at myself sleeping, feeling both terrified and exhilarated.
And I've been trying unsuccessfully for years, much to Jane's amusement.
You're getting closer, though. Your scientific brain just needs to get out of its own way sometimes.
Fair point. Before we dive deeper, I'd like to invite our listeners to take a moment to subscribe to Unseen Journeys if you're enjoying our content. Your support helps us continue exploring these fascinating frontiers of consciousness. And maybe one day, fund the sensory deprivation tank I keep telling Jane would finally help me project.
Oh, is that what we're calling it now? A research expense?
Absolutely. For science, Jane. For science.
Right. Well, while Marcus dreams of floating in salt water to help his spirit flow free, let's ground ourselves in some historical context. Astral travel isn't some new age invention. It's been described across cultures throughout human history.
Indeed. The ancient Egyptians had a concept called the Ba, an aspect of the soul that could leave the body during sleep or after death. They depicted it as a human-headed bird that could freely move between the worlds of the living and the dead.
And in India, the Vedic traditions described siddhis, or psychic powers, that advanced yogis could develop, including the ability to project consciousness beyond the physical form. I've actually studied similar concepts during my anthropological work with indigenous shamans in Peru and Australia.
What struck me in my research was how these experiences often created tension with organized religion, particularly in medieval Christianity. Mystics like Hildegard of Bingen described what we might now call astral experiences, but they had to carefully frame them as divine visions to avoid accusations of heresy.
That's such an important point. These experiences have always existed, but the cultural framework for understanding them has shifted dramatically over time. By the late 19th century, the Theosophical movement, with figures like Helena Blavatsky, brought astral projection into Western consciousness in a more systematic way.
Yes, and I have quite the collection of those obscure theosophical texts gathering dust on my shelves, while I continue my futile attempts to project.
Those books might work better if you open them occasionally instead of just hoping the knowledge will seep through the covers while you sleep. Yeah, that one opened it, sparking a smiling face.
Touché, Jane, touché. Let's talk about the theoretical foundations of astral projection. At its core is the premise that human consciousness isn't confined to the physical body. There's thought to be a subtle, non-physical vehicle, often called the astral body or etheric double, that can separate from our physical form.
And this astral body is said to travel through what's called the astral plane, a layered reality that many traditions describe as having multiple levels. The lower realms tend to be colored by personal fears and desires, while the higher astral realms are described as being suffused with spiritual insights and interdimensional connections.
I must admit, my scientific background made me quite resistant to these concepts initially. The idea of a consciousness that exists independently of the brain runs counter to much of modern neuroscience.
And yet, here you are, hosting a podcast called Unseen Journeys: How the Mighty Skeptics Have Fallen.
Let's just say I've become more open to possibilities beyond our current scientific understanding. My own near-death experience certainly challenged my materialist worldview.
That's what I love about our approach, Marcus. We can hold space for both skepticism and wonder. Now, for our listeners who might be curious about experiencing astral projection themselves, there are several techniques that practitioners have developed over the years.
Yes, and I've tried most of them with varying degrees of success, mostly varying toward the completely unsuccessful end of the spectrum.
Persistence is key. One popular method is called the rope technique, popularized by Robert Bruce. You visualize a silvery rope hanging above you and use your astral arms to climb it, gradually lifting out of your physical body.
I found that one particularly challenging. My logical mind keeps wondering why I need a rope when I could just float up directly.
That's exactly your problem. The rope is just a tool for your mind to focus on. Another approach is the roll-out method, where you imagine rolling sideways or forward off your physical body until your astral form breaks free.
I've had more success with the wake back to bed technique, where you wake up after about 4 to 6 hours of sleep. Stay awake for a short period while focusing your intention on projecting, then return to sleep. I've had some fascinating hypnagogic experiences that way, though not a full projection.
That's actually how many people start. Those hypnagogic states, the dreamlike experiences that occur as you're falling asleep, can be a gateway to astral projection. I also recommend paying attention to what's called the vibrational state, which many people report as a precursor to projection.
Can you describe that for our listeners who might not be familiar?
It's a sensation that feels like electricity or vibrations moving through your body. Some describe it as a gentle buzzing, others as a more intense energy surge. When you notice these vibrations, the key is to stay calm and mentally direct them to facilitate the separation process.
I've definitely experienced those vibrations, along with a feeling of heaviness or paralysis. But then my analytical mind kicks in, and I start wondering what's happening neurologically, which pulls me right back to full waking consciousness.
Classic Marcus. You're thinking when you should be feeling, but that's okay. Everyone's journey with this is different. Now, should we share some of our listeners' experiences from Consciousness Corner?
Absolutely. We've received some fascinating accounts. Here's one from a listener who calls themselves Starseeker. I was lying in bed, practicing the techniques from your meditation episode, when I suddenly felt like I was floating. I looked down and could see my body below me. I panicked and immediately snapped back into my physical form. Is this normal for first-time projectors?
That's such a common experience, Starseeker. That moment of realization that you've actually separated can trigger excitement or fear, which often pulls you right back to your body. It's like your consciousness has a strong, elastic connection to your physical form. With practice, you can learn to stay calm and extend your time in the astral state.
Here's another from Quantum Dreamer. During my projection, I tried to pass through a wall in my house, but got stuck halfway. It was like moving through thick mud. Is there a technique for moving more easily through physical objects?
Great question. This often happens when you're still partially identified with your physical body and its limitations. Remember that in the astral state, intention is everything. Instead of thinking about pushing through the wall, try focusing on your destination on the other side. Your expectation shapes your experience in the astral realm.
We have time for one more. This one's from Mind Explorer. I've been trying to project for months without success. Recently, I've started experiencing sleep paralysis, which terrifies me. Should I continue or take a break?
Mind Explorer, sleep paralysis can indeed be frightening, but it's actually a natural part of sleep that prevents us from acting out our dreams. It can also be a stepping stone to projection. If it's causing you distress, I'd recommend taking a break and focusing on grounding practices for a while. When you return to it, try to recognize sleep paralysis as a sign that you're on the threshold between states. Not something to fear, but something to work with.
Excellent advice. Now, I think it's important we address some of the scientific perspectives on astral projection, as this is an area where skepticism and mystical experience often collide.
I was waiting for the scientist in you to emerge.
Well, it's fascinating from a neurological standpoint. Research has shown that stimulating the temporal-parietal junction in the brain can actually induce out-of-body-like experiences. This suggests that, at least some aspects of astral projection might be explained by specific neural activity.
That's true, and I think it's important information. But I'd also suggest that identifying the neural correlates of an experience doesn't necessarily explain it away. If consciousness is fundamental, rather than an emergent property of the brain, as some quantum physicists have proposed, then the brain might be more like a receiver rather than a generator of consciousness.
A fair point. And there have been some intriguing experiments attempting to verify astral perception, such as placing hidden targets in rooms and asking projectors to identify them. The results have been mixed and controversial, but they do raise interesting questions about the boundaries between mind, brain, and reality.
I think what's most important is maintaining both critical thinking and an open mind. Just because we can't yet measure or verify something with our current scientific tools doesn't mean it isn't real or meaningful to those experiencing it.
Absolutely. Science itself evolves as our tools and paradigms expand. After all, quantum entanglement would have seemed like mystical nonsense to Newtonian physicists.
Exactly. And speaking of expanding paradigms, we're almost out of time, but I want to make sure we touch on some practical safety considerations for those interested in exploring astral projection.
Yes, that's crucial. What advice would you give to beginners, Jane?
First, approach this practice with respect rather than fear. Set clear intentions before attempting to project. Many people find it helpful to create a protective visualization, imagining themselves surrounded by white or golden light before beginning.
And I'd add that grounding practices are essential. After any kind of consciousness exploration, take time to fully return to your body. Simple things like eating a meal, taking a walk, or even just feeling your feet on the floor can help reestablish that connection.
Absolutely. And remember that emotional stability in your everyday life creates a foundation for safer exploration. If you're going through intense emotional turmoil or psychological distress, it might not be the best time to experiment with altered states.
That's excellent advice. And for those who want to learn more, we'll be posting some recommended resources on our website, including books and guided meditations that many practitioners have found helpful.
And next week, we'll be exploring lucid dreaming as another gateway to altered states of consciousness, which some find more accessible than direct astral projection.
We'll also be interviewing Dr. Elisa Marzec, a sleep researcher who studies the neurophysiology of lucid dreaming while maintaining her own spiritual practice. A wonderful bridge between scientific and experiential approaches.
I can't wait for that conversation. Dr. Marzec has some fascinating insights about how traditional dream yoga practices from Tibet align with modern sleep science.
Until then, we'd love to hear about your own experiences with astral projection or any questions you might have. You can reach us through our website at unseenjourneyspodcast.com. We are on any of our social media channels.
Thank you for joining us on this exploration of the astral realms. Remember that the greatest journey is always the one within.
And as we like to say, we truly say that.
Until next time, may your journeys be boundless and your return